after a government shutdown. Additionally, I'm looking forward to an open discussion on other matters in SBA's lending world in 2019. In my humble opinion, Congress must continue to create an environment where small businesses, entrepreneurs, and startups can flourish, grow, and create jobs. Simply put, when they are moving forward, so is the American economy. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Spano. Thank you, Mr. Spano. And if committee members have an opening statement prepared, we would ask that they submit it for the record. I would like to take a minute to explain the timing rules. Mr. Manger will get 5 minutes to testify. Each member gets 5 minutes for questioning. There is a lighting system to assist you. The green light will be on when you begin, and the yellow light will come on when you have 1 minute remaining. The red light will come on when you are out of time, and we ask that you stay within that time frame to the best of your ability. I would like to now introduce our only witness today, Mr. William Manger. Mr. Manger is the Associate Administrator for the Office of Capital Access at SBA. He's held this role since March 2017 and is responsible for the SBA's loan program policy, technology, operations, and oversight. Prior to his current SBA appointment, Mr. Manger served as Managing Director at Brock Capital Group, a boutique investment bank in New York City, where he advised and supported small to medium-sized enterprises in their efforts to raise capital and expand their businesses. From 2007 to 2009, he served as Associate Administrator for Field Operations at SBA. Mr. Manger holds an MBA from the Columbia Business School and a BA from Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. Welcome, Mr. Manger. You are now recognized for my 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Chu and Ranking Member Spano, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today about the recent federal funding lapse and the status of our SBA lending programs. With several new members on the subcommittee and before discussing the lapse, I thought it might be helpful to talk briefly about SBA and the Office of Capital Access. As many of you know, the SBA provides tools and resources that are of great value to America's 30 million small businesses. SBA's programs have been helping small businesses get on their feet and grow since our inception in 1953. Our job in the Office of Capital Access is to administer programs that make capital available to entrepreneurs who would otherwise be unable to access capital through conventional means. While the SBA works with lenders to provide loans to small businesses, the agency doesn't lend money directly to small business owners. Rather, we reduce risk for lenders through loan guarantees. These lending programs, however, were closed during the lapse in appropriations. For a total of 20 full business lending days, SBA was unable to approve loans and was not able to accept new loan applications. Throughout the lapse, we posted a notice on our financial system, and I engaged industry as needed to respond to questions. We also closely examined our program functions to make sure we complied with the Anti-Deficiency Act. While most routine activity in the Office of Capital Access ceased to operate, a few accepted and exempt operations were functional. These included the administrative closing of certain previously approved and obligated 504 loans, limited lender oversight and risk management of our loan portfolio, microloans through the intermediaries since they had already received funding, disaster loan processing through our servicing centers, and our online lender match platform, which automatically matches small businesses seeking financing with SBA-approved lenders. Once funding was restored for SBA operations, our loan systems were immediately operational, and we published an information notice to notify all lenders that SBA was open for business. As a result of process improvements put in place by Administrator Linda McMahon, our ability to get back to business was greatly enhanced. For example, by the end of 2018, we had cut in half the time it takes to process and approve loan applications. These developments played a key role in dealing with the volume of applications once our systems were again open. To provide you an update on that progress, as of this past Friday, SBA has now approved over 7,900 loans for a total of $3.7 billion since we resumed operations on Monday, January 28th. I am very proud of the hard work and dedication of our SBA employees. Through their efforts, we are now back to pre-lapse levels in all of our lending categories. This includes loan origination, loan modifications in our 7A and 504 programs. I also want to share with the committee some action that we took in response to your February 12th hearing regarding the funding lapse. In that hearing, the committee heard from a local brewing company who was interested in expanding their operations through an SBA loan guarantee. At the time of the hearing, however, SBA has not received any paperwork from them, and in response to the hearing, our staff reached out to that company. I wanted to let you know that we have since received their request and approved their loan modification. Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, thank you again for inviting me to testify. I look forward to your questions and continuing to work together on behalf of small businesses across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manger. I will begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Manger, the shutdown essentially froze all SBA-backed lending, but many loan applications had already been submitted to SBA prior to the shutdown and were pending review when the government shutdown began. At the same time, lenders continued submitting loan applications to SBA for approval during the shutdown. This means that there were 2 sets of pending loan applications, those that were submitted pre-shutdown and those submitted during the shutdown. In total, how many such loan applications were pending when SBA reopened?
Madam Chairwoman, so when the lapse in appropriations took place at midnight on the 21st of December, 22nd of December, we had probably about a couple hundred loans that had come in on a non-delegated basis. But just so you understand, most of our loans, over 80% of our 7A loans, come in on a delegated basis. That means they come into our electronic system and are funded in real time, in fact, in a matter of seconds. So that is the majority of our 7A, which is our largest program. Those that did not come in on a delegated basis, that come into our centers on a non-delegate basis to be reviewed by SBA staff, we had probably a couple hundred, and those we were unable to process at that time. In the 504 program, though, the way the 504 program operates, we actually approve and obligate the funding of those loans when the loan comes into our system. So what we did during the shutdown is we had some accepted employees that were able to process 504 loans that had come in prior to the lapse in appropriations that had been already approved and obligated. So those were taken care of. In terms of those that came in during the shutdown, we turned our system off, our CAVs, our central service system off when the shutdown took effect. So actually there were no loans coming into a queue during the shutdown. Once the funding had been restored and the lapse was over in January, we reopened that Monday morning, the 28th of January, with the funding that we had on the CR, and all the loans then that came in at that point were handled. So really there was no backlog of loans in the system because the system actually had been shut down.
So, but you did have some that were non-delegated. So how did your office strategically work through this backlog of loans? For example, did you prioritize by date, loan amount, or some other factor?
So what we did was we did do it a first in, first out basis, FIFO basis. We did also, in our information notice that we sent out to the public once we reopened in January, we said to our lending partners that if there was an urgent loan that needed to be taken care of because the applicant was up against a deadline, for example, they had a way to send an email to our center and that loan would be specifically prioritized. And we did that in several instances where, again, the borrower was up against a deadline that needed to be met. So once we reopened, again, we brought on some additional resources, and we were able to work through the huge volume. I mean, $3.7 billion since January 28th is pretty spectacular, and all of those have been approved. And in fact, the different categories for loan modifications, we are down now to pre-lapse levels, and we were able to do that, within 4 weeks.
So as a result of the shutdown, small businesses were in dire need of financing. because SBA lending programs were not available. And you said that for those 4 weeks that you basically shut down the loan application process. When you opened up again, did you see an uptick in loan applications?
Absolutely. We had a tremendous amount of volume come in the first several days, and it actually has remained high. We have now come back actually a little bit stronger than the position we had been pre-lapse. So, we've seen an incredible increase in our lending over the last month.
Let me also ask, is there any way to insulate lending programs from being frozen due to a lapse in appropriations and to be able to have other entities be able to take over this process of lending while, if there is such a shutdown?
Yes. So, Chairwoman Chu, because of the Anti-Deficiency Act, we are prohibited from putting guarantees on the loans as we usually do. We would be encumbering assets of the federal government that we didn't have a right to and authorization to. And so because of the Anti-Deficiency Act, we were unable to make new loans during the lapse in appropriations. I do want to point out that the one program that actually was still up and running during the lapse in appropriations was, in fact, the microloan program. Because the way the microloan program works is it's actually a program where we make a loan to a not-for-profit lending intermediary who in turn makes the loan to the small business. Much of the authorization and the appropriation for those microlenders had been made to the lenders prior to the lapse in appropriations. So they already had money that they then could loan to the small businesses. And during the lapse in appropriations, our microlending partners were continuing to make microloans. And in fact, our microloan program this year is doing extremely well. We're up 3.5% over last year's record. We have had a record in that program recently. And I'm very pleased to tell you some of the statistics on that program. It's doing extremely well. In fact, in the last year, we've increased our lending to African Americans in that program by 5%. 33% used to be what we would lend in that program to African Americans. This past year, it's gone up to 38%. So we are very pleased with the performance of the microloan program.
Well, thank goodness for that. Well, my time has now expired. The ranking member, Mr. Spano, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Manger, for coming, and thank you for your testimony, and thank you for your very good work with the programs. And kudos to you for getting the program up and going so quickly, for getting caught up, and thank you for providing us regular updates as to the status of that process. And we appreciate that very much. I have a few questions for you. It's been a busy couple of months, obviously. Can you share with us what your office has planned for the remaining part of the fiscal year, calendar year? Do you anticipate rolling out any new policy notices, SOPs, or other regulations? And also, if so, can you provide a timeline and details?
Sure. Thank you very much for that question. So, in fact, just last week, we rolled out an update to our SOP. It's SOP 50105K. And so it was following on from the J that had been launched last year. We try and have updates to that program on an annual basis if we can to keep up with the market. Again, we introduced it, but it does not take effect until April 1st. So it gives us time and our lenders time to adjust to any of the changes in the SOP of 45 days. And again, we will be out, providing classes and webinars with the lenders prior to the April 1st, effective date. We also currently have a rulemaking that is in process. This was actually primarily to promulgate rules for our Express program, which has existed actually for 20 years and has never operated on rules. It was only operating on SOP, and that is not good policy. So one of the first things I did when I came into this position was say, we need to promulgate rules for the Express program because all of the programs should be operating under regulation and not just SOP. So that was launched, where we actually made it available to the public at the end of September. And we are going through the comments that we've received. We've received an awful lot of comments, so we're going through that. Then it has to go to OMB for review. And then finally, the final rule will probably be promulgated sometime later in the summer.
Good, thank you. You already answered my second question, so thank you for doing that. Last Congress, then Chairman Chabot and former Ranking Member Velasquez introduced H.R. 4743, the Small Business 7A Lending Oversight Reform Act of 2018. It went on to pass the House and the Senate, and the President signed that into law last June. Can you provide the committee an update on how the implementation of this law is coming and any next steps that we should be anticipating?
Sure. Thank you very much for that question, too. So part of that law, there was a report that was due to Congress by December 1st of this year. We got that to the committees, and we are implementing through regulation and actually in some aspects of the SOP updates so that we are in compliance fully with the statute that passed and was signed by the President last June. I believe we have 1 year to finalize that legislation in rulemaking, and so we are going to be able to meet that deadline by the end of June. I think it was the 21st of June last year that the President signed the bill, so we'll make that deadline. And we are working diligently on that, and we take very seriously the operations in our Office of Credit Risk Management.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then if you would, for those of us who don't have a real in-depth understanding of the programs, give us an idea, if you would, of what you believe the greatest challenges are that we face in 2019 with regard to the 7A program, the 504 CDC, and the microloan. What is it that you would like to achieve, and what are the challenges that you face this year?
One of the challenges we're taking on is to make sure that our loan programs are available to all Americans no matter where they live. We have put into effect a fee reduction for loans made in rural areas as well as hub zones, historically underutilized business zones, because we want to make sure that, again, people that need loans that live in rural America as well as in hub zones have access to the loans that we make available. And so we've offered fee relief on loans up to $150,000 if they're made in a hub zone or a rural area, and that is one of our big initiatives. Administrator McMahon signed an MOU with Secretary Sonny Perdue of the Department of Agriculture, and we are working jointly with agriculture to make sure that we are reaching out to the rural parts of the country and making sure that we have a robust lending environment in rural parts of the country as well.
Thank you. Madam Chair, you back.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired, and now the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lady. It's actually birch like the tree, and et like I just ate breakfast. So thank you. Thank you so much, Chair Lady, and I appreciate that. I always enjoy it when somebody speaks my name so that I can correct them like that. So it's all in good fun. And thank you, Ranking Member Spano, for the great work you've done. It's been enjoyable working with you, brother. I had a bunch of questions, but I think they've already been asked. But there was one that I was concerned about, and maybe you've answered this or not. If you have, just tell me to go on and watch the notes, okay? But is there any legislation that we as Congress people can focus on to help access to capital for small business owners? Any legislation that's coming down the pike, or some that maybe just in your wish book that you have?
Thank you very much for that question. The President's budget will be coming out in March, but I can speak about last year's budget. We did ask that we increase the ability of express loans. These are usually smaller loans that rely heavily on the lender's underwriting criteria. And in exchange for that, we reduce the guarantee from the federal government on average from 75% down to 50%. So it's a great program because it's only a 50% risk to the taxpayer, and we would like to see that program increased from $350,000, which is the cap right now, to $1 million. In fact, during the Recovery Act, the program was allowed to go up to $1 million. Then that expired, that sunset, but we are asking through the President's budget again to increase the cap on express loans up to $1 million. So that is something we think would be very helpful. The express program has not been performing as well lately, and we think that's because the cap is too low. Even if you took into effect inflation, we'd be well over $500,000 now in that program. So it needs to grow with the times, and anything you can do to help us increase the express loan cap, we would appreciate it.
All right. I'm writing some notes down. You sparked my interest. You said the taxpayers are only on the hook for 50%. How does that work? Is that some of that new math I've been hearing about, or is that a...
So the way our programs work, Congressman, is the federal government places a guarantee on our 7A loans, which is our largest program. Last year, we did over $25 billion in the 7A program. So we put a guarantee on average of 75%. If it's a small loan, in fact, that the guarantee goes up to 85%. So that's how we mitigate risk to our lending partners, and they're able to make loans to individuals and small businesses that they would not normally make a loan to because they don't meet their conventional criteria. In the Express program, because we give more authority to the lender and their own underwriting criteria, we decrease the guarantee from the federal government down to only 50%. But the lenders like it because it's much easier for them to process those loans. It's much faster. The program is greatly used as a revolving line of credit for those businesses that need a revolver in place to be able to draw upon when they need it. For example, they might have a seasonal business and they need to draw money at certain times of the year. So that is a great program. And again, because we reduce the guarantee that the taxpayer is on the hook for down to 50%, it's a benefit to the taxpayer as well. But the $350,000 cap is just, at this point, too low, and we would like to see that increased.
Okay. How are they, you said that these are loans that normally wouldn't be able to be made because of some circumstances. Are they bad risks? Or give me an example. You don't have to give me the bureaucrat thing. I'm running out of time, and I want to get to these. So you go ahead.
Sure. So here's an example. There are many people who would like to start a restaurant. And if they go into their bank and they say, look, I'm wanting to open a restaurant. I've never been in the restaurant business, but I'd like to start this business. I know I'd be good at it. I'm a great cook. I want to open this business. And the bank says, you know what, that's just way too high risk an industry. We can't give you a loan for that. You have no experience. We're not going to do it. But with the SBA guarantee, we mitigate that risk to the lender. Again, on average, a 7A loan is a 75% guarantee. So by taking that guarantee and putting that in place, the lender then says, all right, my risk is mitigated, at least by 75%. We're gonna take that risk on, and we're going to make this loan to you so that you can open that restaurant that you've always wanted to open.
Okay. One last question. I've got
Sure.
13 seconds. How much is a microloan?
A microloan goes up to $50,000, but what's really interesting is the average size of a microloan is only $14,000, and that is very, very impactful for the businesses, the small businesses that need just that amount of capital. And we've seen tremendous growth in that program, and we hope that it will continue to grow.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Chair Lady, I went over. I apologize, ma'am.
But thank you for the questions, and we want to thank the witness for taking time out of his schedule to be here today. The bottom line remains that for 35 days, our country's main avenue for responsible small business lending was shut down. Though we may never fully know the exact magnitude of the shutdown, we do know that the impact on the economy was far more severe than our country's entrepreneurs deserve. I think my colleagues on the other side would agree that it should never happen again. So I thank you, Mr. Menger, and your whole team that got right back to work on day one after the shutdown to get our entrepreneurs back on their feet, and already you have made the SBA whole. I would ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. And if there is no further business to come before the committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.